Welcome, everyone. This is our second office hours of 2023. This one's a little bit different because we're hosting a book club, which is really exciting. So thank you for joining us. Caitlyn, Trautwein, and I are co-hosting this, but this is really a book club designed to be a book club. So we definitely encourage, your participation and your comments. So Caitlyn, do you want to start us off maybe? And
Sure.
I guess we could start with, just what were your initial impressions of the book and what do you think of it?
Yeah, well, I loved it. When I was reading it, there was a lot of fist shaking at the clouds and just feeling validated because I've heard a bunch of these studies and I've seen short articles basically going over the principles but never the sources of how we got here and exactly what here is. So I loved that. Initially, I was a little frustrated that it felt like 3/4 of the book was how we got here, and then there was like a little bit at the end of now what do we do about it. But in the end, I really appreciated that because so many self-help books feel like trying to cram a round peg into a square hole, and it doesn't apply to everybody. Not everybody has a unique experience, and so trying to say, well, this is how you fix it in 200 words can be very off-putting. I read another self-help book right after this one, and I actually didn't get more than 2 chapters in before I quit because I was like, this is not useful to me. So I really appreciated the format, and yeah, it was enlightening. It was frustrating, but I found a bunch of the points at the end very helpful, and have been utilizing them already in my year, and it's made an enormous difference. So what about you, Megan? I know you've read it multiple times. This is my first time, but
I do find that I kind of flip through different parts of it or come back to like different sections since I've read it. And I did realize I forgot that we should probably introduce ourselves because I may know most of you, but maybe you all don't know each other. So maybe if you guys all just want to like type in the chat, where you're located and what your title is or where you work, just so that we can get to know each other a little better. That would be great. But yeah, I really enjoy this book. Like you said, Caitlyn, I felt validated. There were like things that I'd thought of, but I hadn't seen anything in practice that people were doing that. So it really validated those thoughts a little bit. And I think just really got me to change my thinking a little bit about, I meant to like mark up the book a little more, but there's something about, attributing not working and like idleness to laziness. And that's always how I like grew up thinking. So kind of challenging that idea I thought was really helpful for me.
Yeah. And just like on a social level, when she was going into how, when colleagues or just friends getting together and saying, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm so busy. I mean, I don't know how many times I've said that. And I never realized that that's become a cultural thing.
Right.
And I don't know that I personally use it as a brag, but I definitely feel that this has become a major staple of our lives, is how busy we are and how we cram into everything into one day. And that's kind of, gets into not only how busy are we at work, how valuable are we, but then how much work do we cram into our spare time? How much professional development or volunteering or side gigs or, whatever else it is. Even down to like our hobbies.
That exactly, that resonated when she said something about picking up cross stitch and somebody told her like, oh yeah, you can like sell that or something.
Yeah.
And I very slowly knit and crochet, and I have been told that all the time, like, oh my gosh, you should sell this hat. And I'm like, well, it took me 9 months to make it, so I would have to sell this hat for like $700 and nobody's going to buy that. And why can't I just make the hat? What do I have to sell the hat?
Yeah.
So yeah. What do some of the rest of you think about any of these topics?
I just want to kind of jump in on the I'm so busy thing. I actually think most people, rather than saying it as a brag, it's almost a coping mechanism, kind of like when you say, oh yeah, I'm fine, and that means nothing. And maybe it's true for some people, and for some people it's just a quick cover up. Let's not actually talk about how I'm doing. Yeah, that kind of struck me.
Yeah, that
My
point. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, jump in.
Yeah, that point stuck out to me a little bit too, because I remember learning in a sociology class about diet culture and how a lot of us will just say like, oh, I know I need to lose weight, or oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, to kind of deflect anything that people might be thinking about you. So it's kind of interesting how we're doing that now with work. Like, oh, we're too busy for, meeting up or anything like that.
I'll jump in. I actually liked hearing the history of work. Very shocked and disappointed that we could be taking a year off, working every other year. That sounds very exciting to me. And I want to see if I can do a 4-hour workday every day. I don't think I can, but I've been struggling since last year with feeling I don't have enough time. I'm exhausted. And it's because I'm trying to multitask. And I think she has it right. We're just not really cut out to do 5 things at once. I mean, and I don't know. I just want to be able to accomplish one thing, be happy about it, move on, accomplish the next thing, be happy about it, rather than like, I'm done, I'm exhausted, it was just okay, but I've got so many other things to do. That's how I felt. So
Yeah.
I really have to work on the no gadgets before bed. I think that's a tough one. We're always on our phone, whether it's work. I don't check my email at 9, but it's always like a family member calling, or you're catching up with friends or something. You're trying to just cram it all in and then go to bed, and then your mind is thinking about all the things you have to do, and you get up and then you're trying to do all the things you said you were going to do. And anyway, I really like the book.
Yeah, I remember like last year seeing a meme, which I always take memes with a factual grain of salt, because it's, everything's true on the internet. But, someone was making the point that, I guess I'm going to get my decades wrong here, but like in the roaring 20s, like when all of the new gadgets were coming out, vacuum cleaners, washing, dishwashers, those kinds of things. I may be getting some facts wrong, but you get my point. The idea, all of the marketing was like, you're going to have so much more time for leisure. And it's like, it never happened. We're busier than ever. Like my husband and I were talking about the miracle of the microwave the other day. Like his grandmother didn't have a microwave. His mom didn't have a microwave most of her life. And, they had more free time. How did this happen? And, I was really, after thinking about that, I was really struck when she was talking about that economist who said back in the 20s that by the 70s, we'll be working a 16-hour week. And now we're working more than ever. Like I personally don't work a 60-hour week, but I think the percentage of people who do is so much higher than it ever has been. And, that's just so demoralizing to think that we could be doing better and we're not. And part of that is, profit. And, part of that is this, she was getting into kind of the cultural idea of vilifying laziness and, how we've now tied laziness into leisure. And that was one of the things that I really, took out of her book that I'm trying really hard to bring into this, this new year. Because I ended 2022 just rabidly burnt out, like, questioning, do I even enjoy what I do anymore? Why am I in this job? I know I liked it at one point. What do I still love about it? And just really trying to figure out, like, rediscovering the joy of what I do. And there are several techniques I've pulled in from her book, but one of them was, not vilifying myself for taking a day off, for relaxing, for just literally getting on the couch and vegging at the end of the day with a book, because it's really nice. And I don't have to find some productive way to spend my time. Because I've always struggled to relax because I could be doing something better.
Yeah.
And
so
so
that ties in with, the historical stuff she talked about too, of like the seasons of, periods of and bursts of activity of, the farming and the harvesting, and then periods of inactivity, which, I think 3 or 4 really dark, cold months with no electricity, I do not want to be there at all. But there is that kind of point of, there was like a point of rest and, to like restoration.
Yeah, when Keynesian economics started being discussed in the book, I think that was the part where I kind of started feeling a sense of hopelessness. I read the book right on Caitlyn's heels. She lent me her copy, and I feel almost an entirely opposite experience with it. I had a series of very, very difficult years in my career that kind of forced me to reevaluate how I place myself against my work. So a lot of her techniques that she was suggesting, I was kind of already familiar with. And so the fact that the book spent, 3/4 of it describing how we got here, and then very little discussion on it seemed to me, and maybe I missed some overarching point, but it seemed to me there was no discussion of how we as a culture fix things. I ended up feeling extremely discouraged by the book as a whole, because I see, all of these things that she was discussing, and I fail to see how it's going to get better, just because it feels like these things are so ingrained, and the powers that be, whether it be, companies, individuals within companies, CEOs, whatever, it just feels like we're never going to quite start making those radical changes that would lead us to a better way. I mean, the fact that the 4-day work week is getting such rave reviews in testing, but already so much pushback, I look at that as like, it's hard to feel like things will ever get better.
I think I absolutely feel that discouragement. I was like I said, I was shaking my fist at the sky a lot while reading this book of like, we know what's wrong. Why don't we fix it? And I think it's important for me. I've kind of felt it like as a call to arms, and this came up back at the ISMTE annual meeting, the session on burnout, and then the breakout session afterwards. It's like, eventually, our generation and the generation after us, and we're going to be kind of the people making the decisions, and we can choose not to perpetuate bad cultural ways of being. Like, I already see it, when people are talking about, how management is changing, how people are, dealing with subordinates, and how that culture is slowly changing. And I think reading this book and being able to see where we are as problematic will help us make decisions that will change it moving forward. And, we can be the change we want to see in the world, and it may take time.
Yeah,
I saw a great headline.
Admittedly, my discouragement was wanting to see this implemented like in
Now.
the next 5 years, instead of like when we're 65.
Well, and I think it could. I mean, I saw a really kind of hysterical headline. I think it was the CEO of Home Depot was complaining about he doesn't want the lazy woke generation being in charge. And I was like, you don't have a choice, my friend. Eventually, we will be like, and you will need to retire and be done. And I just found it so funny. I mean, it was clickbaity, it was inflammatory, using the whole woke and lazy and all that. But at the end of the day, it was like, you cannot stop the fact that the generations after you are going to be calling the shots at some point. And so I think in that regard, there is an onus on us to educate ourselves as to why the things we are experiencing aren't satisfactory, and how can we make them better for ourselves, and if not for ourselves, for the people that are going to come after us, for the editorial assistants, and for the early career, and for the future managing editors, who might be thinking, well, I was trained to work 50, 60 hours and that's just the way it is. We can break that cycle.
I totally agree about the frustrations that Lindsay, that you're talking about with the book, because that was, it really resonated with me, everything that she talked about. And I thought it was really interesting, but I found myself saying over and over again, like, that's great, you're right, but that's just the way things are. And I kind of disagree with you, Caitlyn. I don't think that's going to change. And I think that we can all, be frustrated with the culture and the way things are, but we're still all going to keep doing more. I mean, that's I don't, well, I mean, maybe someday in the future, but I mean, I think that's a long way away. Because it's just like the expectation. And I found myself getting increasingly frustrated with her, because she kept acknowledging that she was in like a unique situation, but I'm like, but that's exactly it. You're in a unique situation. You know, you work for yourself. You can choose to not do an extra presentation, and maybe you don't make an extra $1,000 that month, but I can't choose to like not attend a board meeting, you know. I think like I can't, like when she's talking about things like, oh, just take a slow train ride when you're going traveling somewhere. I was like, I can't do that. I got to get on a plane and go to the meeting, you know, or I can't just spend all Monday not answering emails. Like, today is my day off email, you know? So I just, I was increasingly frustrated by that type of things. Like, he kept just saying that, you know, you're making such great points and you're offering such good advice, but 90% of the workforce can't follow that. And that's just the way things are, you know? And so it is like what do we do about it? I agree that like, it'd be great if things could change, but that's just kind of the way things, unless the culture is going to change all at once together, which I don't see happening, you know? So that was my frustration with the book, despite all of its excellent points.
Yeah.
Stephanie, I think you and I had a very similar experience with the book. I didn't love the book. I felt like it was very, this is almost your fault. You're not working as many hours as you feel like you are. You need to gain perspective over your time, and you need to get off social media. And I know she wasn't really saying that. She had a lot of other messages there, but what is actually practical for someone who has a 9 a.m. call and then a 9 p.m. call and has to do all the work in between? Are you going to get up every 20 minutes and take a break when you have 40 papers that you need to process? I don't know. So I didn't know if it was a really, you know, applicable book, unfortunately.
I was actually, you know, what's funny is I was with Meghan when I was reading it. We were at this weird silent reading party thing. It just we're literally everyone's sitting there with their books, you know, together in the same room, but not talking to each other. It was strange. But I was reading the book sitting next to Meghan, and she looked over at me. Well, I was just like outraged because I got to the multitasking part, and I was just like, and because, you know, like, try to ask a managing editor not to multitask. I have like 1,000 different little things that I do in a day. Like, that's just not possible, because my job isn't to sit down and write for 4 hours straight working on a book chapter. I've got to send out 50 emails, and I've got to, you know, I've got 3 journals that I've got to check in papers for. I've got to proofread that. And then some editors calling about some stupid problem that, you know, so it's just, there's no way. And then, you know, so I thought, again, that's another thing that's unique to her, but it doesn't apply to a lot of the workforce.
And I think it's, you know, it's so, you know, I definitely feel all that you're saying, you know, because there were a lot. I mean, I was talking to Meghan at one point, we were chatting about the book and how I've seen so many articles about, like, you know, I'm 30 years old with 0 debt and I make $300,000 in passive income, and here's how you can do it too. And it just lists all of these like very situational requirements that not everybody can do. And I think for me, what I took out of the book wasn't, oh, I need to be a TED talker who works for myself and I can just pick my hours. And, you know, it was more a matter of, this is the science behind why we're here and we have to change. And whether that's, like Lindsay said, right away, we can see this, you know, happen within the year. Definitely don't think that's possible. But how can we start pushing back against this expectation that one person is going to process 40 papers in a day, or that I'm going to be available from 9 a.m. until 10 p.m. because that's what my board requires. And it's difficult when, it's your boss saying, this is what you're going to do. But where can we start having those little victories? Where can we start trickling? I hate to use the word trickle down because it makes me think of trickle down economics, but where can we start making those decisions for our own schedule? If it's not work, how is it personal? Like a good example, and I want to get to you, Diane. But one example that I've started utilizing this year is I have a beautiful little schedule of like work, personal, workout. When do I get up? When do I like put on real people clothes because I work at home and it's so easy to live in my PJs. And I used to judge myself so harshly if I didn't stick to the schedule, like in every particular. And one of her things at the end, that I really, really valued was how she talked about putting together a schedule. Hers is more granular than mine. I don't do it every 30 minutes, but it's big chunks. And it was like, how can I make this schedule serve me as opposed to the other way around? And it has been so freeing to know that I can stick to the spirit of the schedule rather than the law of it. And if I don't work out, at lunch, I can work out after work. If I really just needed a nap because my cats crawled all over me all night and I didn't get any sleep, or because I had to take an extra call or whatever. So I think, trying to look at this book, not as you need to do exactly what I'm doing, but, acknowledging where the problems are and trying to break free of them slowly and as we can, I think is very important. And, for me, it's definitely been a 5 p.m. I'm done for the day. There's always going to be an opportunity to work overtime. There's always going to be travel or some emergency that is truly an emergency. But because I didn't clear my queue, or because I got an email at 4:55, that's going to take me 30 minutes to respond, it can wait till tomorrow. It really can. It won't blow up. I've proven over and over again that it won't explode. And I think it's hard to acknowledge that because we have a culture that's trying to push that no overtime. I'm an exempt employee. Anyway, I want to, Diane. Okay, you've had your hand up forever, so I want to get to you.
Well, I was not frustrated with this book. I think my view is different from everybody's here. I enjoyed it, but I think you just sort of made the point of what I was going to say. So she is not, I don't think she was writing to solve everybody's problems, more to acknowledge there is a larger problem. And a couple of you said, why didn't she give solutions? Well, the solution is exactly what you're doing. Stop. That world is not going to end after 5 o'clock if you don't get to those manuscripts, if you don't get to those emails. I think that's the point she was trying to make. We are overworking ourselves because we've been taught to do that. And now it's kind of like, hey, we've missed the point, but it's not necessarily just us. I think a lot of this is driven through profit, because, if there's a board, if there's money involved, they're going to say, hey, you can work more and we can earn more. Well, I want my workers to do that for me, and I'm going to get the benefit of accolades, promotions, etc. And I think that is the hardest thing to break from a lot of people, no matter what generation you're in. Even like, a younger generation, if you're like, hey, I worked so hard, I got that promotion. If you're in a job that can do that, you're going to keep doing that. You can't kind of wipe out everybody's minds to say, you know what, we should be more relaxed. We should be more flexible. We shouldn't work so long. We could make this much, even though it's proven if we worked longer, we'd make, a lot more. So I don't know. I just enjoyed the book. I didn't read it feeling frustrated. I read it kind of like what you're saying, Caitlyn. At some point, I'm going to stop because I need to rest. I want to make dinner. I don't want to rush through reading the book. And this is exactly what I was doing. It was really hard, but I actually took time out of my day I was listening to it, to sit and listen and not listen on my phone or listen while I work. And because that's usually how I do, read my books. I'll listen to a book and I'll keep working. And it is hard. There are days where people are interrupting me with work. Like, why? But it's life. That was a joke. So that's all I kind of wanted to say. I just found the book more informative to me about how I think about work, how I think about my tasks, and how to try and put more of what I want to do in my life and not sort of overwork.
Yeah, definitely. Go,
Yeah,
Lindsay.
I would love to jump onto that, Diane, because I know I've said it a couple of times in other discussions, and I actually owe Caitlyn an article on perceived consequences, because I think that because of the culture that we have come up through, our careers in, we tend to put a lot of the burdens of disaster on our own shoulders. And so we feel almost powerless to start putting up boundaries, like, no, I will not, work past this certain amount of hours. If there are articles in the queues, they will wait until tomorrow. What happens if we start falling behind? Well, maybe we need another person in the office. Maybe we need another editorial assistant. We need to outsource some of this work. Those are decisions that, that I think frequently get countered with, well, you can just work more hours. But at the same time, every time burnout starts coming up in the offices, who does the onus fall on? Like, we have to find our own balance. The techniques that are shared are never, how do we as an organization solve this? It's, well, you can do this and that and the other. It's like, okay, well, let's start actually doing those. And when the consequences of there not being enough people in the office to take the work without us actually working reasonable hours start coming to bear, then we can make the case and hopefully be heard that something has to change, in terms of the structure. And everyone has to make their own calls on how secure they feel in putting up those boundaries, because maybe you are in a situation where your director or the board or what have you is not willing to bring on more staff, and at that point, you have to decide, is it time to make a jump? Can I afford to go somewhere else, or do I just have to work with what I've got? But I definitely am of the mindset that, yes, we all have busy periods. Maybe occasionally it's worth it to your own mental health to work a little longer, or sometimes you just have those international calls that are late, but that can't be constantly. I feel like that really does not need to be the norm, and I think we have to stand up for ourselves, because no one else, 90% of the time, unless you have like an amazing boss and are really lucky that way, no one else is going to do it for us.
The mantra of 2022 that I kept hearing that I'm really pulling into 2023 was being unapologetic about my boundaries. And, as I mentioned before, there's always going to be an opportunity to work extra hours. I don't have to seek them out. We have an amazing annual meeting every year. I think a lot of academic societies do. And that's an all hands on deck for a week straight, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. It's tough, but it's so rewarding. And I know that's going to happen every year. And sometimes there really is that emergency situation. Like our journal uses editorial manager. And I remember a handful of years ago, there was an update that was going to wipe all our settings, and we got notice of it same day. And I was in the office until like 7:30, making sure that all of our settings got copied over to the new system so that we didn't lose them. That wasn't a like, I'm going to choose not to work overtime today. That literally had to happen. But, did I stay until, 6 or 7 p.m. the next day because I didn't get any of my papers done because I was working on editorial manager stuff? I can't remember, but I probably did. And I'm making a choice not to do that anymore, because I will get the work done, or I'll catch up, or so there's an article, so I don't know if you guys have seen an Eon make a quick little punch for this, but I've started a new column called I Am Editor, which is talking about these issues of burnout and kind of, having a conversation about the people behind the editor, and the column that's coming out, sneak preview, is kind of on this. You can be an exceptional employee and still have boundaries. You can be, the exceeds expectation employee and not work until 8 p.m. every single day. And this came up in the breakout session on burnout last fall, where we all have a bit of imposter syndrome because we're afraid if we don't do that level of overwork, then we're not being exceeds expectations. And it's this endless cycle of, if exceeding expectations is what meets expectations, you can never truly exceed expectations. You're just meeting it, and it's this little fish you can never catch. So I think that's also a cultural mindset we need to be changing, that you can have boundaries and also be a rock star employee that any company would want. And that's something I fight in myself, this idea that if I don't, just like exhaust myself to gray hairs and tears, I'm a bad employee. And it's like, no, you can be a good employee without crying at your desk every day. That's possible. And I think, though, that has to be a personal choice. And as Lindsay mentioned, and I think, the author in Do Nothing, Celeste Headlee, she did point this out, that like she is in a place of privilege, and certain people, either because you work in the food industry or because you have, a situation where you don't have a lot of flexibility, everybody has to make their own decision as to what those boundaries can be, what's safe. I hate to use that word, but it's kind of true. Decisions for them to make. And if you're in a position where you can't change a job, if you're in a, maybe a toxic situation, what can you do? And maybe it's more setting boundaries on the home front, like giving yourself those mental health days. Like, work was really, really hard. I can't really make any changes at work right now, but I can make sure I take a bubble bath this evening and read a book, as opposed to feeling like I have to go and, read some educational article and better my mind and, do this side gig or whatever. Like, I feel like there's always somewhere where we can try to be influencing these boundaries and these ideas in our world. And hopefully we'll get to a point where everybody can, have a balanced, work-life situation. But yeah, it's going to take time.
Mm-hmm. No, I think she does touch on that a little bit, about like having kindness and having some grace for yourself. And, that resonated with me too. Cause like, I think, you read different things about, oh, you would never treat how would you react to your friend? How would you treat your friend if they came to you with the kind of problems you are personally having? And, you personally in your mind are beating yourself up about whatever it is, but you would never be like that with your friend. You would be very supportive and, positive, and, it's okay. It'll all be okay. And why do we treat ourselves so poorly? So I liked her point about that, just like having some grace and, treating yourself with kindness. And like, it's hard. I mean, it's a hard, that seems like it's been an ingrained thing in us, that we're always having to push for whatever exceeds expectations, or, if we don't get this done, we're a failure. If we don't have this, I don't know, if our decor doesn't match Pinterest, we're failing at all of the things. And if our food doesn't come out exactly like the recipe looks, it's, so I think just stepping back a little bit and trying to break that habit of thought pattern of like, it has to be perfect or it's not. Like, my thing for the past couple of years has tried to be like, that whole, like, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Like, sometimes it just like, and that's hard and I struggle with it, but sometimes you just have to let it just needs to go.
And I find it so hysterical. And I've said this before to colleagues and to myself, but like, we're editors, right? If the world was perfect, or if publishing was perfect, or if authors were perfect, we wouldn't have a job. So the idea that we are, here to facilitate and have expertise and, either copy edit if that's what you do, or peer review or manage, so that, we can be the experts in an area where people aren't, because they're brain surgeon or they're, economists or they're whatever. And, we're filling in a knowledge gap or correcting mistakes and then feeling like, well, we can't make mistakes. It's just a bit of a logical fallacy, and obviously, there is a certain like level of expectation of being able to do your job competently. But I think everybody I've ever talked to and met in editing puts that like to an extreme degree. And I think part of that is what she was getting to, this like just intense drive and perfectionism that we have in the workforce and in our lives. Social media is in there too. And it touches just about every area I can think of, what you're saying, self-judgment. And I would never talk to my friends like that. And I can look at someone walking down the road and be like, wow, she's beautiful, or she's fit, or she looks successful. And then look at myself and be like, well, you're a slob. And it's just like, whoa, wait a minute. That's so backwards. Like, it's definitely ingrained. And I think it's going to take, a lot of work personally and culturally to get there. I love that phrase, comparison is the thief of joy. And it's really, really important.
I do think that we should talk to ourselves like we would to a friend is very true. And I think there's a little subcategory of that in a professional setting where we have to be careful how we hold ourselves accountable, because I think it's easy for that to kind of move beneath us. Like if we ever have people who are working under us or we're training or something, I think that there can be an easy path for frustration to come in if your employee doesn't do it the way that you do it, or maybe it takes them a little longer to pick something up. I think there's a little voice in the back of our heads that can be, well, like, well, how hard can it be, or why, I think that we have to be that voice that we address to ourselves. Maybe is not something that we would ever say to a friend, but I think that it can be insidious in the way that it presents itself to colleagues. And so I think that's even just another reason to really be kind to ourselves, because then we can extend that grace to people around us who, maybe we're not friends with, but we still have to work with them on a daily basis.
Christine.
I just wanted to say, like, I have a lot of thoughts, but I read something years ago that was like, if the higher ups in the company don't use their leave time, then the employees below them don't feel like they can use their leave time. So I made a conscious effort to be like, to use my leave time and try to demonstrate it and like almost try to influence up. And in some ways, I think in my particular situation, like I have a very like mentor friendly relationship with my boss. And I think I have influenced her to try to like set more time aside for her to use her leave and stuff. But I've always experienced this, like that the older generation I work with, they're like complete workaholics. They're like way after hours. Our previous executive director was always there on the weekend. And like, I think he was multitasking. I think he wasn't always working, but he was working a lot of the time. And it's like, that's such a toxic, I think it's a toxic example to set. It didn't seem to actually make other people in our office, very small office, work later. But in some ways, I think it also fostered like them to be lazy. Like, so I think if you have like a incompetent coworker, I know this sounds bad, but if you not compare yourself, but like knowing that like they can get away with doing next to nothing, that it kind of helps you realize like I can do and meet the requirements of my job, and I don't have to go above and beyond and kill myself because it's just not worth it. Like you can do your job well, you can pursue excellence, but you don't have to like be a workaholic just because that's what the other people above you are doing.
That's so true. Christine, I've probably shared this story with some of you, but I think it was in 2020, like, just deluge of work and never ending. And there was definitely a time where I used to send out quarterly reports to the editors and never got any, comments back about it or anything, but I kept sending them out because that's just what, like, I don't know, that's what I was doing with my time. And I think for several months, I just forgot. It just didn't come up. I didn't have time to do it. And I forgot about it. And like 6 months into the year, I was like, oh, I've never sent anything out. Whoops. And like not a single person of, the 20-person editorial board was like, I never received that quarterly report. What is going on? And I was like, I'm just not going to do this anymore. Like no one, who was I doing it for? What were we using it for? Nothing. So, we talk a lot about editorial efficiencies, which then I think also ties into her whole Celeste Headlee's thing about like life hacks. So I feel like there's a balance between like efficiencies and like constantly searching for those life hacks. But yeah, like looking at these things of, you know, what are we doing and why are we doing it this way, is really important to keep. And Lindsay, that was a really interesting point. Like we're always saying to like the people who've been in work before us, like, why were you doing it this way? Why, what was going on here? But then we can't turn around to the, you know, the people coming up behind us and being like, you must do it my way, because that's like the same problem. So yeah, I think just like that constant questioning of like, why am I doing what I'm doing is a fair question to be asking at all times. And just because something is working, you know, now, it may or may not work, you know, 6 months or 2 years from now. And that's why we have like ISMTE and professional development groups, so that we can hear from each other and like, oh, that's a great idea. Why am I not doing it that way? So yeah, but I don't know, did anyone else, what do you think of the life hacks? Because like I've definitely been down the rabbit hole with those, like whatever, hack your way of productivity or whatever it is.
I definitely loved her perspective of not everything needs to be hackable. Like you can enjoy doing something the slow way, or you know, it just, yeah, the cult of efficiency. That's what she called it. And you know, it's so funny because you know, I'm German on my mother's side, and there's, you know, a lot of jokes about German efficiency. But this book gave me a new perspective on that word, and how, yeah, it gets into the whole tweezing every day down to its minute and its maximum, you know, profitability. I mean, I was raised with the phrase time is money, and I just always thought that was kind of one of my dad's like dadisms, and I'd never realized, probably should have assumed, but it was just one of those kid things that gets in your brain. I never assumed that it went anywhere else, and it's apparently a global thing, and or at least a very Western thing. And you know, it's I get like the what the point is with that, but my time doesn't need to be constantly capitalized. Like it can just be for me, or just for, you know, my family, or yeah, like your point about crochet. Like every hobby doesn't have to turn into a career. And you know, I have a very stable, you know, nine to five. It's not actually 9 to 5, but you know, you get my point. It's a very stable job, Monday to Friday. But my husband is self-employed as a musician, and so I see, you know, how hard his job is in terms of he doesn't get evenings, he doesn't get weekends, he doesn't get PTO. It literally is the if he doesn't take a gig, he doesn't get paid, he doesn't get sick time. And I remember at one point, like during the pandemic, there was a little bit of chafage, you know, between me and my family, because we were being very careful about, like, you know, we've got a ton of young nephews, and babies get sick constantly. They're just little germ factories. And there was a period of time where we were being very, 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 very careful about checking in with the family, who's got a cold, who's sick, because Matthew had a series of gigs he could not miss. If he got sick, the gig would get canceled, and we would lose a serious amount of his paycheck. And I remember explaining that to my mom, and she was like, I never thought about it that way. And I was just like, if he doesn't work, he doesn't get paid. And if he gets sick, he doesn't work. So it's, you know, I think, you know, as she was pointing out, everyone's got a different situation, and everybody's got, you know, different things that they can do. And I'm very blessed that I can use my evening however I want. Whereas other people have to make a conscious choice. Am I going to make enough money this month to cover my bills? But, you know, in that regard, I almost feel like I have an onus to use that time more wisely and be more conscientious and a better steward of that time, if I'm going to use that phrase, and be aware of it, you know. And being, you know, married to my husband has been over many years an eye-opening about that. I mean, I was a studio art minor, and people were always like, are you gonna be an artist for a career? And I was like, no, I want to enjoy painting and not like turn it into something that I stress about. So anyway, rambling off on that. Anybody else? Cult of efficiency.
Well, I just hate that people, especially before the pandemic, wouldn't stay home when they were sick, especially because I have Crohn's. So I have a reduced immune system. And so it's like, it would just irritate me so much that people came in and they're like obviously sick. And it's like, I'm glad we work at home now.
Well, and that gets into a cultural thing, you know,
Mhm.
one, if we have the ability to work from home, we have the technology to keep ourselves and others safe. And, you know, I would love to see, you know, it was so frustrating to me that at the height of the pandemic, you know, we were applauding all of our essential workers and then kind of threw them to the wolves once we were tired of that, like get back in there, get back to work. And it's like, if you're sick or if you have a reduced immune system and you're coming into contact with all of these people and exposing yourself to germs, like there's no support system for people who work in the food industry to stay home if they have sick time. I mean, I'm sure there are some situations where they maybe have there's a restaurant that provides sick leave or something. But so many people have to make the decision, I'm going to go into work feeling ill, or I'm not going to pay rent today. You know, and that's just like you know, the kind of, you know, revolutionistic part of my brain is like, we have the technology and we have a society that should be able to support people. So yeah, that gets into a lot of deep culture change, that maybe gets into a more political discussions than we need to get into today. But yeah, we have the technology and we have the ability to support each other. And yet again, we're kind of choosing not to. Simplifying some of these arguments. I'm sure there's a lot. If it was an easy answer, we would have done it by now. But anyway, Lindsay.
Yeah, just I want to throw this little anecdote in there before we get too far from whatever it was said that brought it to mind. But I think tagging onto the cult efficiency and also going back to, you know, what happens, you know, like if we think to ourselves often, if I don't do X, then something, whether we define that or not, something bad will happen. And I read just this week about a gentleman who I think just recently passed away, who in World War II was forging birth certificates and passports for people needing to get out of Germany. And he at one point had to make, I think, 900 different documents in the course of 3 days. And he literally worked for 2 days straight and kept himself awake by thinking, if I can make, you know, 30 documents in an hour, if I sleep for 1 hour, 30 people will die. And you know, that's an extreme example. And I don't think any of us have a situation where if we decide to put something down, anything near serious will happen. But I think that it's very easy for us to create a vague scenario of, you know, if I don't get these papers processed, then our turnaround times will fall into the abyss and the journal will be closed and it will be all my fault. You know, none of us actually think through that step by step, but I think we allow it to be this miasma at the back of our minds that allows us to just stick to the plan when there's really no reason to.
Yeah, or I haven't met an editor yet who wasn't highly motivated and highly efficient, this dreaded word, and yeah, putting it off till Monday or giving yourself a moment to stand up and stretch and breathe or get a second cup of coffee is not going to break the bank.
A moment to stand up, stretch, run away into the woods, never to be seen again.
Yeah. And it's weird because I've been trying to write this article for Eon and I keep like caveating myself out of it. It's like, you don't want to encourage people to take breaks because then they'll get lazy and then they won't do their job and someone will get fired and it'll be your fault. And it's, you know, doing the exact same thing. And I think it, you know, it yet again comes down to like, you know, the unlimited PTO argument comes to mind, where if someone has unlimited PTO and they just utilize it to go and travel the world and not do their job, it's going to be very clear very quickly, and they will not stay in that job. But scientifically speaking, and then also just in practice, it's shown that people are happier, they feel freer, they don't feel trapped by the number of days they have to calculate out, and they generally tap out at 20 to 30 days of time off anyway. And if they're just like an enormously like, I can do this amount of work in 2 hours and then ye off to the beach, like great, like the same amount of work is getting done. But so few people utilize that because they're afraid it's going to get abused, even though, like I said, it's very obvious that if that's happening, it will be apparent. You can't exactly hide the fact that you're not I'm trying to read Diane's comment. Celebrating successes. Yeah. As opposed to just, I did the bare minimum today, of that meeting expectations. Yeah, we don't.
And
That's
without
great.
pausing, yeah, that's great. Without pausing, it feels like we're very caught up into just like moving on to the next thing. So like, because we have all this stuff to do and there's no time to do it. So even when we have accomplished, even if it's just like, I got the work I needed to get done today, or a huge project or a huge presentation, we don't ever take the time to just be like, wow, that was a good job. It's always just like, okay, well, next on to the next thing. And yeah, I don't think we like stop and consider what we have done. I think from when I read this a few years ago, I tried, I have my like to-do list, but it's a never ending list for personal, house, work, everything. It never just, it never ends. It just always it doesn't matter how many things you cross off of it, more things keep getting added to it. And it's a struggle and it's really hard, but I've been trying to think of it like, look at what I've accomplished or checked off versus like, oh my gosh, look at all of these things I didn't get done. And I'm not very successful at that change in mindset, but some days when I do notice I feel different about my day when I can like look at it at that perspective.
It might feel like kind of a silly thing to do, but I had all of these to-do lists, and at the end I would throw them out. If you hold on to them and look back at everything you've achieved, it really works wonders for feeling a little bit better about where you are and how much more you have to do.
I've started doing that with my husband, and I bought a house a year and a half ago. And, it's very easy to feel like the list of fixes and repairs and improvements is endless. And so I started writing down, like, last year we got a new roof and a new electrical panel and new gutters and new downspouts. That's a lot. That's a serious lot. And I'm very happy that we did that. And if that means like for the next year and a half I don't do very much because that was really expensive, we still did it. It's still done. Yay. So yeah, I think that's very important. And before passing the ball to you, Lindsay, I just wanted to make the point that I think I started my career in book publishing and then came to journal publishing, and book publishing is very like, you have a starting point and you have an end point. Books published, done, yay. And you maybe move on to the next thing, but it's very closed and you have that kind of sense of finalization. Whereas with journal publishing, it's very much, at least on my end of things, it's not, it's just constant papers coming in. Maybe we have like the monthly issue is kind of a thing, but it's constant. And so that was a mindset change. And I think the multitasking makes that harder, because if we don't break up our day into, kind of finite tasks, there is no end. And you can feel like, I was so busy, but what did I do today? So I try to break my day into like, okay, I'm doing my emails. Like I check my email all day, but in the morning, get it cleared out. If that's a good opportunity to go get a second cup of coffee before sitting back down again to take a look at my cues, great. So I think we've only got 5 minutes. Oh, Lindsay.
Tagging onto the kind of rewarding yourself or like just changing your mindsets. I was struggling at the beginning of this week with kind of a general anxiety because I have my journal is going through some changes. We're launching a new platform. It's a ton of work. And on top of the journal, which up until recently I handled by myself, I also have a newsletter. So I'm publishing 12 issues a year virtually alone. And the newsletter can be messy because there is no pipeline for content. It just kind of, it comes in or it doesn't. And a lot of the times my deadlines are blown. Like my needs in terms of like the issue goes to print, whether I have content or not, are not respected. And so I was getting really stressed out about some fires that I've been having to put out recently. And it just occurred to me, the reason I'm good at my job isn't because I make sure these fires never crop up. It's because I handle them. And I make sure that things continue apace, even if it means that I feel a little bit frantic at times, but I make them, yeah, exactly. I'm a firefighter. I didn't choose that as part of my career, but lo and behold, where's my fire extinguisher? So yeah, it kind of helped me feel a little bit better. That's like, this is what actually makes me exceptional at my job, is that I don't let these crazy caveats that I have to deal with overwhelm me. I just deal with them. So it doesn't make it any less frustrating when my deadlines are not respected, but at least I know that I have the power to find other things to fix whatever's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. Well, we just have a few minutes left. So I did want, well, first, I just want to thank you for being here. I really enjoyed this discussion. I hope you did too. It's, I think it's something, there's a lot of different topics here that we can, keep diving into. I did just want to throw out, we've had some office hour book clubs. We had a few last year. I think the DEI Advisory Council organized them, but I did just want to, like, for the few of you who are here, is this something that you would be interested in doing again? We could do, articles or essays or, parts of books or something, on a, I don't know what sort of regular basis, but like, did you find this helpful? Okay. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, if anyone has suggestions for books or ideas, I'm happy to take them. I can put my email in the chat.
Me too.
Awesome. And we don't have our next office hours on the calendar yet, but there should be more soon. But office hours are open to anyone. Anyone can host it on any topic. They're pretty low lift. You have the tech support from our management company, Donna and First Point. But anyone at any point can do it. So if you have a topic that you're interested in discussing, or a question, or even like a, something you're trying to do with your journal and you'd like to get feedback and hear from others, these are pretty wide open in terms of what we can do with them. So I welcome your suggestions and definitely invite you if you or a colleague want to host one. There is a form. I don't have the link on me, but I will ask Donna to send that out with the recording. So this meeting was recorded, so we will probably post this to the ISMTE website at some point soon. But yeah, thank you very much. Caitlyn, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, just that I really enjoyed talking with all of you and hearing your thoughts. And kind of similar to the office hours, I mentioned the I Am Editor column that just started this year in Eon, and it is open to other writers. Like Lindsay's going to do the article on perceived consequences once her life kind of chills out with that transition she's talking about. But if any of you want to email me an idea, either of a column you'd love to see written, or if you'd like to submit one yourself for consideration, it's definitely on all of these ideas of burnout and just trying to create the kind and supportive culture that we would all love to be in. So yeah, please feel free to reach out on that. It's open to guest writers, and I would love to have that. So that's it.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.